Behind the political comedy and mansion antics of Benson lurked secrets that would make even Governor Gatling's wildest stories seem mundane. From Jerry Seinfeld's humiliating firing to a governor's wife literally eaten by horses, this beloved sitcom hid bizarre production mysteries, shocking casting decisions, and one of TV's most controversial cliffhanger endings that was never meant to exist. Prepare to discover the strange truth about television's most unlikely political dynasty. Fact 1. Jerry Seinfeld's brutal firing. Before Jerry Seinfeld became one of television's biggest comedy stars, he experienced one of the most humiliating moments of his early career on the sitcom Benson. In 1980, a young and relatively unknown Seinfeld landed what seemed like a promising recurring role as Frankie, a delivery boy who fancied himself a stand-up comedian and would unsuccessfully try to practice his comedy routines in front of the mansion staff. Seinfeld appeared in just 3 episodes during the show's second season, playing a character that wasn't too far from his real-life persona at the time. Frankie was an aspiring comedian who nobody wanted to hear, constantly trying to work on his material while making deliveries to the governor's mansion. The role seemed tailor-made for the struggling comic who was still trying to make his mark in the entertainment industry. However, the producers and Seinfeld quickly found themselves at odds over creative differences regarding how the character should be portrayed. The disagreement escalated to the point where the show's creators decided to let him go, but they chose to handle his dismissal in the most unprofessional way possible. Rather than calling Seinfeld or his agent to inform him that his services were no longer needed, the Benson production team simply stopped writing scripts for his character. When Seinfeld showed up for what he thought was a routine table-read session, he discovered there was no script waiting for him. Only then did he learn that he had been fired from the show. In a 2006 interview, Seinfeld revealed his feelings about the incident, saying, "I was angry. That doesn't happen in stand-up. Once you get to a certain level, they don't make you go back to the beginning." This harsh treatment on the Benson set actually motivated Seinfeld to focus more seriously on his stand-up career, where he could maintain creative control over his material and professional relationships. Fact 2. The governor's wife was eaten by horses. One of the most absurdly dark backstories in television sitcom history belongs to Governor Eugene Gatling's deceased wife on Benson. In the show's pilot episode, viewers learned that the governor's wife, Olivia, had died in what can only be described as the most bizarre accident ever written for a family-friendly comedy series. According to Governor Gatling's explanation in the first episode, his wife was on her way to a costume party where she had planned to dress as the Sugar Plum Fairy from the famous ballet The Nutcracker. Being the creative and detail-oriented person she apparently was, Olivia decided to make her costume as authentic as possible by sewing it entirely out of real sugar cubes, creating what must have been a sparkling and elaborate fairy outfit. The tragedy occurred when Olivia decided to take a shortcut through a pasture on her way to the party. Unfortunately, the horses in the field were immediately attracted to her sugar cube costume, and in their eagerness to get to the sweet treat, they ended up eating both the costume and Olivia herself. This left Governor Gatling a widower and his young daughter Katie without a mother, all because of an incredibly unfortunate encounter between livestock and confectionery fashion. What makes this story even more unusual is that the writers presented this completely outrageous death as a simple throwaway joke in the pilot episode. The absurdity of the situation was meant to establish the show's connection to its parent series Soap, which was known for its ridiculous and over-the-top storylines. However, this particular backstory was so bizarre that it seemed more fitting for a dark comedy than the generally wholesome family sitcom that Benson would become. The writers apparently borrowed this concept from a classic Mary Tyler Moore Show episode where a character named Chuckles the Clown was trampled by an elephant while dressed as a peanut, showing how television comedy often recycles and adapts its most memorable absurd moments. Fact 3. 3 secret endings were filmed. The infamous cliffhanger ending of Benson that left fans wondering forever who won the gubernatorial election was actually just one of 4 different conclusions that the production team secretly filmed for the series finale. In the final season, the show's central premise had evolved into Benson running against his former boss, Governor Gatling, for the state's highest office, creating dramatic tension between 2 characters who had developed a close friendship over 7 seasons. Gary Brown, who directed the finale along with 20 other episodes of Benson, revealed years later that the production team had prepared for multiple possibilities by filming 4 completely different versions of how the election would conclude. One version showed Benson winning the governor's race and achieving his ultimate political goal, while another depicted Governor Gatling successfully defending his position and remaining in office. A third alternative ending featured a tie between the 2 candidates, which would have created an entirely different set of complications for a potential 8th season. The fourth option was the freeze-frame cliffhanger that actually aired on April 19, 1986, where viewers watched Benson and Governor Gatling sitting together as election returns came in, with the broadcast cutting off just as the announcer was about to reveal the winner. The production team's original plan was to choose which ending to use during the summer break between seasons, giving them time to decide which direction would work best for the show's future storylines. According to Brown, regardless of which candidate won the election, the long-term plan for Season 8 was always for Benson to eventually become governor. The multiple endings were filmed as insurance against different network decisions and story possibilities, but the show's unexpected cancellation meant that none of the alternate conclusions were ever used, leaving all 4 versions locked away as lost television history that fans will never get to see. Fact 4. Robert Guillaume preferred soap's Benson. Robert Guillaume, the talented actor who brought Benson Dubois to life, openly admitted in multiple interviews that he actually preferred playing the character on the original show Soap rather than on his own spin-off series. This surprising confession revealed the behind-the-scenes creative tensions that shaped one of television's most beloved characters during his transition from supporting player to leading man. On Soap, which ran from 1977 to 1981, Benson was portrayed as a much sharper and more confrontational character who wasn't afraid to speak his mind to anyone in the wealthy Tate household. The original version of Benson had what Guillaume described as a grouchier personality, an off-color sense of humor, and a willingness to be outspoken about the ridiculous situations happening around him. This Benson would regularly engage in verbal sparring matches with other characters and delivered cutting observations about the absurd world he inhabited. However, when producer Susan Harris created the Benson spin-off, she made a deliberate decision to soften the character's edges to make him more appealing as a lead character for mainstream television audiences. The new version of Benson was more affable, diplomatic, and restrained in his interactions with Governor Gatling and the mansion staff. While he retained his intelligence and wit, the sharper elements of his personality were toned down significantly to avoid alienating viewers who might not be comfortable with a more aggressive African-American protagonist. Guillaume understood the business reasons behind this creative choice, recognizing that television executives wanted to ensure the character would be palatable for mass audiences across different demographics. However, he felt that something essential was lost in translation, as the original Benson's more complex and challenging personality had made him a more interesting and authentic character to portray as an actor. Fact 5. Future Star Trek legends worked together. Long before they became beloved characters in the Star Trek universe, 2 of Benson's main cast members were already building a strong working relationship that would carry them into science fiction stardom. Ethan Phillips, who played the enthusiastic press secretary Pete Downey, and Renee Auberjonois, who portrayed the pompous chief of staff Clayton Endicott III, had no idea that their time together on the political sitcom was preparing them for even greater adventures in outer space. Phillips joined the Benson cast in 1980 during the show's 2nd season, playing Pete Downey as a high-strung but well-meaning public relations specialist who often found himself caught between the governor's political mishaps and the media's demands for answers. His character provided comic relief through his frantic attempts to manage crisis situations and his romantic relationship with fellow staff member Denise Stevens. Auberjonois had already established himself as one of the show's standout performers in his role as Clayton Endicott III, the snobbish and hypochondriac chief of staff who constantly clashed with Benson over mansion management and political strategy. His character's pretentious personality and tendency toward dramatic overreaction made him a perfect foil for the more level-headed title character. Both actors remained close friends after their time on Benson ended, and their shared experience on the show helped them when they were both cast in different Star Trek series during the 1990s. Phillips would go on to play Neelix, the cheerful alien cook and morale officer on Star Trek Voyager, while Auberjonois became the shape-shifting security chief Odo on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Interestingly, both of their Star Trek characters served as supporting crew members who provided essential services to their respective space stations and starships, echoing their roles as dedicated government employees on Benson. Fact 6. The show's location was deliberately mysterious. Throughout its entire 7-season run, Benson never once revealed which state Governor Gatling actually governed, creating one of television's most enduring geographical mysteries that has sparked decades of fan theories and detective work. The writers deliberately kept the location vague, referring only to the state or the capital, without ever providing viewers with a concrete answer about where exactly the governor's mansion was supposed to be located. This intentional ambiguity led dedicated fans to become amateur detectives, searching through episodes for any clues that might reveal the show's setting. Some viewers noticed that Benson's office contained a map showing New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, leading many to conclude the show was set somewhere in the northeastern United States. However, other fans discovered that the same office also featured a picture of the Chesapeake Bay region, which pointed toward a more southern location. The mystery deepened when fans analyzed various dialogue references throughout the series. In one episode, characters mentioned traveling 1,900 miles to reach the White House, which would place the state somewhere in the western United States, possibly Montana, Idaho, Utah, or Arizona. Another episode referenced a school located 300 miles away, but without knowing whether this school was in the same state or a neighboring one, the clue only added to the confusion. Some fans believed the show was set in Illinois because of a reference to Springfield in one episode, while others argued that since most states have a city named Springfield, this clue was essentially meaningless. The Connecticut theory gained support from fans who remembered that the parent show Soap was set in that state, but this connection was never confirmed by the writers. The deliberate mystery allowed viewers from any state to imagine that Benson might be working in their own state government, making the show more universally relatable while avoiding any potential political controversies tied to specific real-world locations. Fact 7. A real house in Pasadena played the mansion. While the fictional governor's mansion on Benson may have existed in an unidentified state somewhere in America, the actual building used for exterior shots was a very real and elegant home located at 1365 South Oakland Avenue in Pasadena, California. This impressive residence served as the visual representation of the seat of state government throughout the show's 7-year run, appearing in establishing shots that helped viewers understand the grandeur and importance of Governor Gatling's official residence. The choice of this particular Pasadena house was likely influenced by Southern California's role as the entertainment industry's primary production hub, making it convenient and cost-effective for the show's producers to film exterior shots without having to travel to distant locations. The house itself possessed the appropriate architectural dignity and imposing presence that television audiences would expect from a governor's official residence, with its stately facade and well-maintained grounds providing the perfect backdrop for a political comedy series. What makes this location particularly interesting for modern fans is that the house remains largely unchanged from its appearance during the show's original run from 1979 to 1986. Dedicated Benson enthusiasts can still visit South Oakland Avenue in Pasadena and immediately recognize the building from the opening credits and various exterior shots used throughout the series. The house has become something of a pilgrimage site for television history buffs who enjoy visiting filming locations from their favorite shows. Unlike many television locations that have been demolished, significantly altered, or made inaccessible to the public, this particular residence has maintained its original character and remains visible from the street, allowing fans to step back in time and imagine Benson, Governor Gatling, and the rest of the mansion staff going about their daily political and domestic activities behind those familiar walls and windows. Fact 8. The horse death joke was recycled. The bizarre backstory of Governor Gatling's wife being eaten by horses while dressed as the Sugar Plum Fairy wasn't an original creation by the Benson writing team, but rather a clever adaptation of one of television comedy's most famous and beloved absurd death stories. The writers borrowed this concept directly from a classic episode of The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which had aired several years earlier, and featured an equally ridiculous character death that became legendary among television fans. In the original Mary Tyler Moore Show episode, a children's television character named Chuckles the Clown met his unfortunate end when he was trampled by an elephant during a circus parade. The tragic irony of Chuckles' death was that he was dressed as a peanut at the time of the accident, making his demise both absurd and darkly humorous since elephants are famously fond of peanuts. This episode became one of the most memorable and frequently referenced moments in television comedy history, demonstrating how the right combination of tragedy and absurdity could create lasting comedic impact. When the Benson writers needed to explain how Governor Gatling had become a widower, They took the basic structure of the Chuckles the Clown story and adapted it to fit their own show's needs. Instead of a clown being trampled by an elephant while dressed as a peanut, they created the story of a governor's wife being eaten by horses while wearing a costume made of sugar cubes. The core elements remained the same: a person in an elaborate costume meeting their end because of animals who were attracted to what the costume represented. This type of creative borrowing and adaptation was common in television writing during the 1970s and 80s, as successful comedic concepts were often recycled and reimagined for new shows and different contexts, allowing classic jokes to find new audiences while maintaining their original comedic impact. Fact 9. Ted Danson had a secret cameo. 1 year before Ted Danson became television's most famous bartender on Cheers, he made a memorable guest appearance on Benson playing a character named Dan who swept the governor's secretary Marcy Hill off her feet and led her to the altar. This early television role showcased Danson's romantic leading man potential and proved to be excellent preparation for the charm and charisma he would later bring to his iconic role as Sam Malone. In the Benson episode titled Marcy's Wedding, which aired in 1981, Danson played a television producer who fell in love with Caroline McWilliams' character Marcy Hill, the efficient and often unlucky and love secretary who worked closely with both Governor Gatling and Benson throughout the show's early seasons. The episode featured the romantic storyline that would ultimately write McWilliams out of the series, as her character left the governor's mansion to start a new life with her television producer husband. During the wedding episode, Danson's character Dan became involved in some typical Benson-style comedy when a lover's quarrel erupted during a live television broadcast, with various mansion staff members getting caught up in the on-air drama. Benson himself was asked to serve as the person responsible for giving Marcy away at her wedding ceremony, highlighting the close relationship between the secretary and the show's title character. What makes this appearance particularly interesting is the timing of Danson's career trajectory. His role as the romantic television producer on Benson demonstrated his ability to play sophisticated, successful professional characters with natural charm and wit. These same qualities would make him perfect for the role of Sam Malone when Cheers premiered later that same year, launching him into television stardom and making him one of the most recognizable faces in American comedy during the 1980s and beyond. Fact 10. Krause had a supernatural running gag. One of Benson's most mysteriously funny running gags involved what appeared to be a supernatural connection between the title character and Gretchen Krause, the proud German cook who served as both his workplace rival and unlikely friend throughout the series. Whenever Benson would mutter a sarcastic comment or insult about Krause under his breath, thinking she was safely out of earshot, her voice would immediately boom from somewhere off stage with her signature response of I, he, ear, you. This recurring joke became one of the show's most beloved and recognizable elements, but it also created an unexplained mystery that the writers never bothered to address or explain. Krause seemed to possess an almost psychic ability to detect whenever Benson was making disparaging remarks about her, regardless of how quietly he spoke or how far away she had walked from the scene. The timing was always perfect, with her dramatic response coming just seconds after Benson delivered his cutting observation. The comedic effect was enhanced by Inga Swenson's distinctive delivery of the line, which she would stretch out with exaggerated pronunciation that emphasized each syllable in a way that sounded both threatening and playful. Her voice would carry from kitchens, hallways, or other rooms in the mansion, suggesting that she had developed some kind of supernatural radar specifically tuned to detect Benson's verbal attacks on her character. What made this running gag even more entertaining was that it never seemed to surprise or concern any of the other characters in the show, who apparently accepted Krause's mysterious ability as just another quirky aspect of life in the governor's mansion. The show treated this impossible feat as completely normal, never offering any logical explanation for how she could consistently hear comments that should have been completely inaudible to anyone not standing directly next to Benson. Fact 11. The show accidentally predicted the internet in what may be one of television's most remarkable examples of accidental technological prophecy. Benson became the first network drama series to demonstrate the use of the internet in a sixth-season episode titled Scenario that aired on February 22, 1985. This groundbreaking moment occurred more than a decade before most Americans had ever heard of the World Wide Web, and years before personal computers became common household items. The episode featured characters using what was essentially an early version of internet technology to communicate and share information, demonstrating concepts that would not become familiar to mainstream audiences until the mid to late 1990s. At the time the episode was written and produced, the internet existed primarily as a research tool used by universities, government agencies, and technology companies, making it virtually unknown to the general television-watching public. What makes this technological prediction even more impressive is that the writers and producers of Benson were creating a political comedy series, not a science fiction show that might naturally explore futuristic communication technologies. The inclusion of internet-like technology in a sitcom about state government operations suggests that someone involved in the production had remarkable foresight about how computer networking would eventually revolutionize communication and information sharing. The episode's portrayal of this early internet technology was presented as a practical tool for government work rather than as a fantastical or far-fetched concept, which demonstrated an understanding of how such technology might actually be implemented in real-world professional settings. This realistic approach to depicting emerging technology helped establish Benson as a show that was not only entertaining but also surprisingly forward-thinking in its recognition of how computers and networking would transform modern society and government operations in the coming decades. Fact 12. Multiple characters were mysteriously recast. The position of Governor Gatling's chief of staff experienced one of television's most unusual casting journeys, going through 3 different actors and 2 completely different character concepts before finally settling on the version that fans would come to know and love. This behind-the-scenes musical chairs began with the show's very first episode and continued to evolve throughout the entire first season as producers struggled to find the right dynamic for this crucial supporting role. In the original pilot episode, actor David Hedison played the chief of staff character, bringing his experience from action and adventure roles to what was intended to be a more straightforward political aid position. However, when the show moved into regular production, the producers decided to recast the role with Louis J. Stadlin, who portrayed a character named John Taylor throughout the entire first season of Benson. Stadlin's John Taylor was written as a competent but somewhat unremarkable government official who helped Governor Gatling manage his daily responsibilities and political obligations. The character served his purpose adequately, but apparently failed to create the kind of memorable personality or comedic chemistry that the writers were hoping to achieve with this important supporting role. At the end of the first season, the producers made the dramatic decision to not only recast the role once again, but to completely reinvent the character from scratch. They wrote John Taylor out of the show with a storyline that had him quitting his job to run for political office, even going so far as to have him refuse an endorsement from Governor Gatling in a final act of independence. When the second season began, René Auberjonois joined the cast as Clayton Endicott III, a pompous, hypochondriac aristocrat who was far more snobbish and high-handed than his predecessors, creating the perfect foil for Benson's practical sensibilities. Fact 13. The series had presidential aspirations. The creative team behind Benson had far more ambitious long-term plans for their title character than most viewers ever realized, with producer Bob Fraser later revealing that the show's ultimate goal was to chronicle Benson's rise all the way to the White House as the first African-American president of the United States. This groundbreaking storyline would have made television history and tackled one of the most significant social and political barriers in American society during the 1980s. Fraser disclosed these plans years after the show's cancellation, explaining that the writers had mapped out a multi-season trajectory that would gradually elevate Benson from his position as lieutenant governor to higher offices on the national stage. The plan involved having Benson win the gubernatorial election, and then use his success as a state governor to launch a campaign for federal office, potentially as a United States senator before ultimately seeking the presidency. This ambitious storyline would have been remarkably prescient, as it would have depicted an African-American president more than 20 years before Barack Obama actually achieved this historic milestone in real life. During the mid-1980s, the idea of an African-American president was still considered highly unlikely by many Americans, making the Benson storyline both progressive and potentially controversial for mainstream television audiences. According to Fraser, this long-term presidential plot may have actually contributed to ABC's decision to cancel the series, as network executives may have been uncomfortable with the social and political implications of such a storyline. The concept of depicting the first African-American president on a sitcom might have seemed too serious or politically charged for what was intended to be light entertainment, potentially alienating viewers who were not ready to accept such a dramatic shift in American political representation, even in a fictional context. Fact 14. A child's life was saved by the show. In one of television's most remarkable examples of educational entertainment making a real-world difference, a Benson episode that demonstrated the Heimlich maneuver ended up providing a young viewer with the knowledge needed to save another child's life in an actual emergency situation. This extraordinary story shows how television programming can serve as an unexpected source of life-saving education, even when that education is delivered through the context of a lighthearted political sitcom. The original Benson episode featured a dramatic scene where the title character used the Heimlich maneuver to save Gretchen Krauss when she was choking during a meal at the governor's mansion. The show's writers included this emergency medical procedure as part of a storyline that demonstrated Benson's quick thinking and his genuine care for his fellow staff members, despite their frequent disagreements and workplace conflicts. Years after this episode originally aired, a young child who had watched the show found themselves in a terrifying situation when a friend began choking during a meal or snack. Drawing on the knowledge they had absorbed from watching Benson perform the life-saving technique on television, the child was able to correctly apply the Heimlich maneuver and successfully dislodge whatever was blocking their friend's airway. This real-life rescue made the Benson episode an unexpected piece of public health education that proved the value of including practical medical information in mainstream entertainment programming. The incident demonstrated how children can absorb and retain important safety information from television shows, especially when that information is presented in a memorable and dramatic context that helps them understand both the technique and the circumstances when it might be needed to save someone's life. Fact 15. The cliffhanger was network sabotage. The infamous cliffhanger ending that left Benson fans wondering forever who won the gubernatorial election was actually the result of deliberate deception by ABC network executives who had already secretly decided to cancel the show while publicly requesting the unresolved finale. Producer Bob Fraser revealed years later that the network specifically asked the production team to create a cliffhanger ending, supposedly to build anticipation for the following season, while simultaneously planning to pull the plug on the series immediately after the episode aired. This behind-the-scenes betrayal represented one of television's most cynical examples of network manipulation, as ABC executives allowed the writers and cast to believe they were setting up storylines for future episodes, while knowing full well that no 8th season would ever be produced. The network's decision to cancel Benson was reportedly driven by the show's high production costs and internal politics at ABC, where new executives were looking to replace established programming with cheaper alternatives. Fraser described the cancellation as a last-minute decision that caught everyone involved with the show completely off guard, despite the fact that network executives had clearly been planning this outcome for some time. The producer also revealed that there had been growing hostility between the show's creative team and ABC management, which may have influenced the network's willingness to end the series in such an unsatisfying manner. According to Fraser, if the show had been renewed as originally promised, the storyline would have continued with Governor Gatling winning the election and Benson being appointed to serve as a United States Senator, eventually setting up his path toward even higher political office. Instead, the network's deceptive handling of the series finale ensured that fans would never receive closure on the central question that had driven the entire final season's narrative arc.